When Alex Eala clutched her left leg and collapsed to the court surface during her match against Viktorija Golubic, it wasn't just another injury timeout. It was a breaking point that exposed the brutal reality facing the WTA's most promising young talents. The 19-year-old Filipino star, who had been grinding through the professional ranks after her historic 2022 U.S. Open Girls Championship, found herself unable to push off her left leg, her movement compromised, her face contorted in visible pain as Swiss veteran Golubic methodically dismantled what remained of her resistance. This wasn't a dramatic collapse in a Grand Slam final with millions watching. This was the heartbreaking grind of the lower-tier circuit, where rising stars fight for every ranking point, every dollar of prize money, and every ounce of momentum that might propel them toward the top 100. The injury didn't just ruin one match. It potentially derailed months of careful planning, ranking calculations, and the championship trajectory that the entire Philippine tennis community has been desperately waiting to witness. First serve percentages dropped from 68% to 51% across 7 games, while Eala's average serve speed plummeted 13 kilometers per hour from 162 to 149, numbers that revealed physical compromise long before television cameras captured the visible grimace that would define this match. The statistical deterioration told a story of accumulating damage, of a young body sending distress signals that competitive adrenaline temporarily masked but couldn't ultimately overcome. The match itself, contested at a WTA 125 event in Asia, where both players desperately needed ranking points for their Grand Slam qualifying campaigns, had begun as a tactical chess match between youth and experience, between Eala's aggressive baseline power and Golubic's crafty veteran variations. But tennis at the professional level offers no sympathy for physical weakness. And what started as competitive tennis transformed into something far more uncomfortable to watch. A wounded player trying to survive against an opponent with 11 years of tour experience who knew exactly when and how to attack vulnerability. Viktorija Golubic entered this encounter ranked number 153, precisely 34 spots higher than Eala's number 187, bringing with her a resume that included a career-high ranking of number 35 achieved in 2022, an Olympic semifinal appearance in Tokyo, and the accumulated wisdom of 447 career WTA main draw matches. She had faced Grand Slam champions across her career, had survived her own injury setbacks including a 7-month absence following knee surgery in 2018, and possessed the emotional detachment necessary to capitalize on an opponent's physical distress without hesitation or guilt. This wasn't cruelty, it was professionalism, the cold calculation that separates players who maximize their career earnings from those who let opportunities slip away due to misplaced compassion. Eala, by contrast, had competed in just 73 WTA main draw matches at this point in her career, still learning the tactical sophistication and psychological warfare that defines professional tennis at its highest levels. The precise moment when injury became undeniable arrived at 3-4 in the first set, deuce on Eala's serve, when she planted her left leg to generate power on a forehand approach shot and immediately recoiled as though she'd stepped on broken glass. The subsequent point saw her shaking her left leg between serves, rolling her hip in small circles, testing whether the sensation was temporary cramping or something more ominous. By the changeover, her decision was made. She summoned the tournament athletic trainer, triggering a medical timeout that would stretch to 7 minutes and fundamentally alter the competitive dynamic of the match. Television cameras captured the treatment in detail. Extensive taping of her left thigh from hip flexor to mid-quadriceps, ice packs applied to the hip joint, and what appeared to be anti-inflammatory gel massaged into the muscle tissue. The trainer's body language suggested concern. Repeated questions, careful palpation of the injury site, skeptical expressions when Eala insisted she could continue playing. When competition resumed after that first medical intervention, Eala's court coverage statistics collapsed with devastating mathematical precision. Advanced tracking technology deployed at professional tournaments measures player movement across multiple dimensions: total distance covered per point, average speed of directional changes, maximum sprint velocity, and court coverage radius from baseline center. During the opening 4 games before injury symptoms appeared, Eala averaged 4.2 meters of movement per point, a figure consistent with aggressive baseline players who take balls early and dictate with their forehand. Following the medical timeout, that number dropped to 2.8 meters per point, a 33% decline that made it nearly impossible for her to track down Golubic's angled ground strokes or recover position after being pulled wide. Her maximum sprint speed, measured on a desperate stretch to reach a drop shot in the 6th game, registered at 19.7 kilometers per hour compared to the 27.3 kilometers per hour she'd achieved on a similar defensive effort in the 3rd game. A decline so precipitous that it suggested she was physically incapable of loading properly on her left leg to generate explosive movement. Golubic's tactical adjustments revealed the ruthless intelligence that comes with veteran tour experience. Her slice backhand, which had appeared in only 3 of the first 18 points, suddenly became her primary weapon, deployed on 14 of the next 23 points. The slice served multiple strategic purposes. It kept the ball low, forcing Eala to bend and load on her compromised left leg. It changed the rhythm and pace, preventing Eala from settling into a comfortable baseline pattern, and it provided Golubic herself with more recovery time, as the slower ball flight gave her additional milliseconds to reposition for the next shot. The Swiss player's drop shot frequency spiked even more dramatically, from 0 attempts in the opening games to 7 drop shots across the next 6 games, winning 5 of those points outright as Eala simply couldn't cover the necessary court distance to reach balls she would have tracked down effortlessly when healthy. The targeting of Eala's forehand side, which required her to load weight on her injured left leg, showed even more sophisticated tactical exploitation. In the opening games, Golubic had distributed her serves relatively evenly, 52% to the forehand side, 48% to the backhand. Following the medical timeout, her serve direction shifted dramatically to 71% forehand side serves, forcing Eala to push off her left leg repeatedly just to get into position to return serve. First serve return winners, which Eala had produced 3 times in the early games with her signature inside-out forehand attack, disappeared entirely from her arsenal. She won just 1 of her next 17 return points on Golubic's first serve, a catastrophic decline that made every Golubic service game a virtual formality. The score progression documented physical deterioration in ruthless detail. Eala held serve to reach 3-4 despite the injury, grinding through 8 deuces and saving 2 breakpoints, but that game consumed 15 minutes and left her visibly exhausted and limping more pronouncedly between points. Her next service game lasted just 4 minutes. She was broken at love, winning only 4 points in the process, her serve speed having declined to an average of 145 kilometers per hour, barely faster than many recreational players' first serves. 2 of her 4 double faults in that game came on second serves that landed mid-court, indicating she couldn't generate any racket head speed or body rotation without pain. Golubic served out the first set 6-3, holding at love with 4 unreturned serves, including one that landed in the service box at 147 kilometers per hour, slower than Eala's first serve average when healthy, but more than sufficient when returned weakly by a player who couldn't load properly on her legs. The second set deteriorated into something that felt almost uncomfortable to witness, a public display of physical breakdown that highlighted tennis's merciless individual nature. Eala won just 9 total points across the first 4 games, falling behind 0-4 in barely 20 minutes, each game featuring multiple unforced errors from positions she would normally convert into offensive opportunities. Her winners to unforced errors ratio told the statistical story. She had been +4 in the opening games, 10 winners, 6 errors. But by the middle of the second set, that ratio had collapsed to -15. 3 additional winners, 23 total errors. The kind of differential that indicates a player who can't execute even fundamental shots because physical pain disrupts proper technique and timing. The second medical timeout arrived during the changeover at 0-4, stretching to 12 minutes, 5 minutes longer than the first intervention, a duration that suggested more serious consultation about whether continuing would risk long-term structural damage versus temporary aggravation of an existing injury. Courtside microphones captured fragments of conversation between Eala, her coach, and the tournament physiotherapist, with terms like strain versus partial tear, MRI confirmation, and permanent damage risk filtering through to the broadcast audio. The tournament medical staff appeared to be explaining that continuing to compete on a soft tissue injury that had already limited her movement by 30% risked converting what might be a grade 1 strain requiring 2 weeks rest into a grade 2 or grade 3 injury that could sideline her for 2 to 6 months. When play resumed after the extended second medical timeout, Eala's condition had worsened rather than improved, despite additional treatment. She was now limping visibly during points, not just between them, fundamentally altering her movement patterns in ways that created secondary stress on other body parts as she compensated for the injured hip flexor. Her serve motion had become almost unrecognizable. Instead of the fluid weight transfer and hip rotation that generates power, she was essentially arm serving, pushing the ball into play with minimal leg drive, resulting in an average serve speed of 138 kilometers per hour, slower than her normal second serve average and completely eliminating any chance of holding serve against a tour-level opponent. 4 consecutive ground strokes found the net in the next game, shots she would make 90% of the time when healthy, but which now sailed long or caught the net tape because she couldn't rotate through her hips or transfer weight properly without searing pain in her left hip flexor region. At 0-5, trailing 0-40 on her own serve, Eala made the decision that had been inevitable for the previous 20 minutes. She approached the chair umpire, spoke briefly while visibly fighting back tears of frustration and disappointment, and officially retired from the match. The handshake with Golubic was professional but brief, neither player lingering for conversation, both understanding that this was simply the harsh reality of professional sports, where one player's misfortune becomes another's opportunity for ranking points and prize money. Golubic's expression remained neutral, professional, neither celebrating the victory nor expressing sympathy for her opponent's injury. In post-match protocol, she would collect 18 ranking points for the second-round victory and $3,200 in prize money, while Eala received just 4 ranking points, points for a second-round appearance, and $1,850. Numbers that sound modest in isolation, but represent meaningful differences when you're fighting to improve your ranking from number 187 to the top 150 threshold, where Grand Slam qualifying becomes directly accessible. Rankings mathematics operate with mathematical brutality, where every point gained or lost cascades through a complex system that determines tournament acceptance, prize money access, and career trajectory. Eala stood at number 187 when she walked onto court against Golubic, precisely 36 ranking spots away from the approximate number 151 cutoff, where players gain direct acceptance into Grand Slam qualifying draws, the gateway to tennis's most prestigious events and most substantial prize money distributions. The WTA's rolling 52-week ranking system creates a constant defensive battle where players must match or exceed their previous year's results at every tournament, simply to maintain current ranking, let alone improve their position. Eala had reached the semifinals at this same event 12 months earlier, earning 30 ranking points that were scheduled to drop off her ranking total in the next computer update, regardless of this year's result. Her second-round retirement meant she earned only 4 points, creating a net loss of 26 points from her ranking calculation, enough to drop her approximately 15 to 18 spots to a round number 205, pushing her further from Grand Slam qualifying acceptance rather than closer to that crucial threshold. The prize money differential compounds the ranking damage in ways that threaten the financial sustainability of her professional career. WTA 125 tournaments distribute approximately $115,000 in total prize money across all competitors, with carefully calibrated payment tiers that reward advancement through the draw. Second-round losers receive $1,850, a sum that barely covers 3 nights of hotel accommodation and meals at tournament sites in expensive Asian cities. Had Eala reached the quarterfinals, her prize money would have increased to $3,200. A semi-final run would have paid $5,500. A finals appearance would have netted $9,400. And tournament victory would have awarded $17,300. For a player whose entire annual income from all sources, prize money, sponsorships, and national federation support totals approximately $180,000 to $210,000 before expenses of $150,000 to $175,000. The difference between $1,850 and $17,300 represents more than 2 months of net income. These aren't abstract numbers. They determine whether she can afford to maintain her current coaching staff, whether she needs to skip tournaments to save on travel expenses, whether she can invest in proper sports medicine support, or whether financial pressure forces compromises that undermine her competitive development. Her career prize money through this tournament stood at approximately $312,000 across all professional competitions. Respectable for a 19-year-old, certainly, but modest when contextualized against the financial demands of maintaining an international competitive schedule. Sports business analysts who study professional tennis economics estimate that players ranked between 150 and 200 need to spend between $150,000 and $200,000. $200,000 annually to maintain truly professional operations. Full-time coaching at $60,000 to $75,000 per year, travel and accommodation for 25 to 30 tournaments at $40,000 to $50,000, physical training and sports medicine at $25,000 to $30,000, equipment beyond what sponsors provide at $8,000 to $10,000, and miscellaneous expenses including stringing, nutrition, mental training, and tournament entry fees, adding another $15,000 to $20,000. Players who try to operate on reduced budgets, flying economy instead of business class to save money, sharing hotel rooms, reducing coaching support, skipping proper sports medicine, generally plateau in the rankings because the physical and competitive toll of budget operations prevents them from performing at their peak consistently enough to break through to the top 100. The injuries timing during the Asian swing of the WTA calendar amplified its commercial and strategic significance for multiple stakeholders. Regional players benefit dramatically from competing in their home geographical region through reduced travel costs, familiar food and climate conditions, and the intangible confidence boost that comes from competing near home with substantial fan support. For Eala specifically, tournaments in Southeast Asia offered the additional advantage of increased media coverage that enhances her commercial value to potential sponsors. Philippine television viewership for WTA events featuring Eala averaged 1.2 million viewers during her matches in the preceding 6 months, according to broadcast ratings compiled by Nielsen Sports for the Philippine Basketball Association network that carries WTA content. These viewership figures represented a 340% increase compared to WTA event viewership in the Philippines when no Filipino players participated, transforming tennis from a niche sport with 280,000 average viewers into a mass-market event exceeding 1 million viewers during Eala's matches. That viewership surge translates into commercial leverage that extends beyond Eala's personal endorsement deals to impact the entire ecosystem of tennis development in the Philippines. The Philippine Tennis Association's annual operating budget increased by 23% in the 2 years following Eala's 2022 U.S. Open Girls Championship, rising from approximately $2.1 million to $2.6 million, as government sports funding and private sponsorships grew in response to tennis's elevated visibility. Youth tennis participation among girls aged 8 to 16 in the Philippines increased by an estimated 18% during this same period, with tennis club managers and coaches consistently citing Eala as the inspirational figure driving families to invest in tennis lessons, equipment, and tournament participation. Her sustained absence from competition due to injury threatens to interrupt this growth trajectory at precisely the moment when Philippine tennis infrastructure was beginning to establish the sustainable pipelines of talent development that might produce future professional players beyond Eala herself. The broader WTA injury epidemic among rising stars provided disturbing context for understanding Eala's breakdown as part of a systemic pattern rather than an isolated incident. The 2024 season witnessed injury retirements from 14 players ranked in the top 100 before age 22, representing a 37% increase from 2023's rate and establishing the highest percentage of young player injuries since the WTA began systematic tracking in 2008. Emma Raducanu's wrist and ankle surgeries limited her to 13 matches across 10 months. Linda Fruhvirtova's abdominal injury required surgical intervention and cost her 9 months of competition. Clara Tausson's back problems restricted her to just 18 matches over 7 months. And Amanda Anisimova took an 8-month mental health and physical recovery break, citing burnout and chronic pain. These weren't random unfortunate events. They represented a pattern that sports medicine researchers attributed to the accumulated physical stress of transitioning from junior circuits to professional tours without adequate recovery time or physical preparation. Statistical breakdown of injury patterns by age cohort revealed alarming disparities that highlighted young players' vulnerability. Among players aged 18 to 21, lower body soft tissue injuries, hip flexors, hamstrings, quadriceps strains, Achilles tendinitis, and knee problems accounted for 58% of all injury-related tournament withdrawals during 2023 to 2024, compared to just 38% among players aged 25 and older. The younger cohort's bodies, still completing physical maturation while simultaneously facing professional training loads, proved more susceptible to overuse injuries that develop when muscle fatigue reduces the body's capacity to absorb repetitive impact forces. Eala's hip flexor injury fit precisely into this pattern. The muscle group activates with every serve, every ground stroke rotation, and every explosive directional change, accumulating micro-trauma across weeks of consecutive tournament play until a single movement exceeds the tissue's compromised capacity and causes the partial tear that brings everything to a painful halt. The ranking protection system, which theoretically exists to help injured players maintain their competitive position during recovery, offers virtually no assistance to players in Eala's situation. WTA rules allow players to use their pre-injury ranking for tournament entry purposes, but only under highly specific circumstances. The player must miss a minimum of 6 consecutive months of competition, must apply for protected ranking status with detailed medical documentation, and can use that protected ranking for entry into only 8 main draw events and 8 qualifying events following their return. These provisions primarily benefit established players recovering from major surgeries. Someone ranked number 25 who tears an ACL and misses 9 months can use her protected ranking to enter top-tier events upon return, avoiding the indignity and competitive disadvantage of playing qualifying rounds. For Eala, ranked number 187 and facing a likely 4 to 8 week injury rather than 6-month absence, the protected ranking system provides zero benefit. She'll simply watch her ranking deteriorate as points decay off her 52-week rolling total, then must grind her way back up through tournament results once she returns to competition. Emma Raducanu's post-championship injury cascade provides the most cautionary comparison for understanding the potential trajectory Eala faces if this hip flexor injury proves more serious than preliminary assessments suggest. Raducanu, who captivated global tennis audiences by winning the 2021 US Open at age 18 without dropping a single set throughout qualifying and main draw play, subsequently endured an injury nightmare that saw her ranking collapse from number 10 to outside the top 300 within 18 months of that triumph. The British sensation suffered wrist tendinitis that progressively worsened through 2022, ankle ligament damage that required surgical repair in May 2023, and wrist surgery in May 2024 that sidelined her for 3 months during the critical grass and hard court seasons. Her match count told the statistical story of a career interrupted: 52 matches in 2022, just 29 matches in 2023, and only 13 matches in the first 10 months of 2024 before she underwent her 3rd surgical procedure in 18 months. The financial devastation of Raducanu's injury cycle illustrated how quickly professional tennis economics can turn negative for even the most celebrated young stars. Her prize money earnings peaked at $3.1 million in 2022, when she was healthy enough to compete regularly in high-tier WTA 500 and WTA 1000 events, but collapsed to approximately $420,000 in 2023 and barely $180,000 through October 2024, an aggregate 94% decline from peak earnings across just 2 calendar years. While Raducanu's substantial off-court endorsement portfolio with brands including Porsche, Dior, Tiffany, and British Airways cushioned the financial impact of lost prize money, her situation demonstrated that even players with multi-million-dollar sponsorship agreements suffer when injuries prevent them from competing at the level that justified those commercial partnerships. Several of her endorsement contracts reportedly included performance clauses tied to ranking position and tournament participation minimums, creating financial penalties beyond just lost prize money when injury prevented her from fulfilling contractual obligations. Raducanu's ranking protection provided only partial assistance during her comeback attempts because the WTA's protected ranking rules contain limitations that favor established stars over emerging players. She received protected ranking status at number 103 following her wrist surgery, allowing her to enter 8 WTA main draw events at that ranking level, rather than her actual ranking, which had fallen to number 301. However, she exhausted those 8 protected ranking entries within 3 months of returning to competition, and several of those entries came at smaller WTA 250 events where her protected number 103 ranking didn't provide dramatically better seeding or draw position than her actual ranking would have. Once those 8 entries were consumed, she found herself competing in qualifying rounds at tournaments where she had been a top-seeded main draw player just 18 months earlier, a psychologically difficult adjustment that compounded the physical challenge of regaining match sharpness after extended absence. The comparison to Eala isn't merely about injury, it's about the specific vulnerability of physically developing young players whose bodies haven't yet adapted to professional tennis's cumulative stress. Raducanu experienced her initial wrist problems during what appeared to be routine practice sessions rather than during matches, suggesting accumulated damage over weeks of training and competition finally manifested acutely. Sports medicine specialists who analyzed her case publicly noted that her relatively late physical maturation, she grew approximately 3 inches between ages 16 and 18, meant her musculoskeletal system was still adapting to adult biomechanics, while simultaneously facing WTA-level training intensity. Eala's physical development timeline shows uncomfortable parallels. She added approximately 2 inches of height between 2021 and 2023, requiring technical adjustments to her serve motion and ground stroke preparation to accommodate longer limbs and a shifted center of gravity. That ongoing physical adaptation, combined with the jump from junior Grand Slam competition to WTA professional tours, created precisely the conditions that injury prevention research identifies as highest risk for soft tissue breakdown. Amanda Anisimova's injury-complicated trajectory offers another sobering data point, though with different circumstances that included psychological burnout alongside physical problems. Anisimova burst onto the WTA scene by reaching the 2019 French Open semifinals at age 17, defeating defending champion Simona Halep along the way and climbing to a career-high ranking of number 21 by October of that year. However, recurring foot and ankle injuries through 2020 to 2022 gradually eroded her ranking and competitive confidence, contributing to her decision to take an 8-month break from professional tennis starting in May 2023. When she announced her hiatus, she cited both mental health concerns and the need for extended physical recovery, explaining that years of playing through pain had left her emotionally exhausted and questioning whether she wanted to continue in professional tennis at all. Anisimova's return to competition in January 2024 required complete ranking reconstruction from number 377, forcing her to compete in ITF circuit events and WTA 125 tournaments to accumulate the points necessary for direct acceptance into higher-tier events. Her win-loss record during the first 6 months of her comeback stood at 18-12, a respectable 60% winning percentage that nonetheless left her ranked only at number 142 by July, still outside direct acceptance into Grand Slam main draws, and struggling to break back into the top 100 despite possessing the talent that had once made her a Grand Slam semi-finalist. The prize money implications proved particularly stark. She earned $1.46 million during her breakthrough 2019 season, but just $83,000 during her injury-plagued 2023, and approximately $140,000 during her comeback first half of 2024. The cumulative financial impact exceeded $2 million in foregone prize money when compared to conservative projections of what she might have earned had she maintained top 50 ranking status continuously from 2019 through 2024. Coco Gauff represents the essential counterexample that proves health and durability remain perhaps the most valuable assets in professional tennis beyond pure talent. Golubic, who turned professional at age 15 in 2019, has competed in an average of 67 matches per year across 5 professional seasons, missing only 3 scheduled tournaments due to minor physical issues that never required more than 2 weeks of recovery. Her ranking has climbed steadily and consistently from number 68 at age 17 to number 4 at age 20, without the dramatic peaks and valleys that characterize injury-disrupted careers. From ages 17 to 19, precisely the age range where Eala currently competes, and where Raducanu and Anisimova suffered their most significant setbacks, Golubic improved her ranking 64 positions, accumulated $8.7 million in prize money, and maintained a 71% career win rate across 198 matches. The statistical contrast between Golubic's steady ascent and the interrupted trajectories of injured contemporaries reveals how dramatically injury impacts career earnings during the critical development years between ages 18 and 22. Golubic earned $2.9 million per year on average during ages 17 to 19, while Raducanu averaged $1.2 million annually during the same age span due to injury-related absences, and Anisimova averaged $950,000 annually during her age 17 to 19 seasons, interrupted by foot problems. These earnings differentials compound over time because higher prize money enables players to invest in better coaching, more comprehensive sports medicine support, and reduced financial stress that allows them to focus purely on performance development rather than economic survival. Golubic's durability stems from multiple documented factors: an exceptionally comprehensive physical training program supervised by a full-time strength and conditioning specialist from age 14, conservative tournament scheduling that avoids competing 3 consecutive weeks even when healthy, naturally efficient movement mechanics that biomechanics experts describe as textbook for minimizing joint stress, and what appears to be genetic good fortune in terms of injury resistance. Iga Swiatek's scheduling philosophy provides another instructive model, particularly relevant for understanding how elite young players can protect long-term health while still achieving ranking success. Swiatek, who won her first Grand Slam at age 19 in 2020, has subsequently maintained one of the most conservative tournament schedules among top players, competing in an average of just 19 tournaments per year compared to 23 tournaments for the average top 20 player. She routinely declines lower-tier WTA 250 events even when healthy, prioritizes 2-week training blocks between competition periods, and has publicly stated that she views schedule management as equally important as on-court practice for sustaining career longevity. This strategy has proven remarkably effective for both health and performance. She has suffered only one significant injury, a rib issue in 2023 that sidelined her for 3 weeks across 4 full professional seasons, while accumulating 5 Grand Slam titles by age 23 and maintaining an extraordinary 84.2% career win rate. However, Swiatek's ability to implement this conservative schedule stems directly from her top 2 ranking position, which guarantees direct entry into any tournament she chooses, regardless of how many events she skips. Eala, ranked number 187 and fighting to reach the top 150, faces entirely opposite incentives. Every tournament she skips represents lost opportunities to earn ranking points she desperately needs. The cruel paradox of WTA ranking mathematics is that players who most need rest to prevent injury are precisely those who can least afford to take it without suffering ranking consequences, while established stars who could absorb ranking point losses from missing tournaments have sufficient ranking cushion to prioritize health over short-term competitive results. Alex Eala's sponsorship infrastructure reflects her position in professional tennis's challenging middle tier, past the amateur stage where athletes receive no commercial support, but not yet in the elite ranks where 7-figure endorsement deals provide financial security regardless of tournament performance. Wilson supplies her equipment, including rackets valued at approximately $350 each retail, strings, bags, and accessories, representing an annual benefit estimated at $8,000 to $12,000 in retail equivalent value. While meaningful support for a developing professional, this equipment provision pales beside the comprehensive packages that top 50 players receive, which often include 6-figure cash bonuses for using specific equipment, dedicated racket technicians who travel to tournaments, and priority access to prototype equipment before it reaches market. Her apparel arrangement with Nike Philippines represents more substantial value, estimated by sports marketing analysts familiar with Southeast Asian tennis endorsements at $45,000 to $70,000 annually, combining cash payments and product provision. This regional Nike deal operates at a different tier than the global Nike agreements that Grand Slam champions sign. Maria Sharapova's Nike contract peaked at approximately $70 million over 8 years. Serena Williams earned an estimated $55 million from Nike across her career, and current stars like Naomi Osaka command approximately $10 million annually from Nike. Eala's arrangement likely includes performance escalators that increase compensation if she achieves specific milestones, such as breaking into the top 100, reaching a Grand Slam main draw, or winning a WTA title, creating additional financial pressure where injury-related ranking declines directly impact her earning capacity. Philippine National Federation support provides approximately $35,000 to $50,000 annually, covering partial coaching expenses, priority tournament travel costs, and access to sports science resources including physiotherapy sessions and fitness training during periods when she's training in the Philippines. This government-backed funding increased roughly 60% following her 2022 U.S. Open Girls Championship, as the Philippine Sports Commission recognized her potential to become the nation's first senior-level Grand Slam singles champion. However, this support comes with obligations that create scheduling conflicts. She must represent the Philippines in Billie Jean King Cup competitions, Asian Games events, and Southeast Asian Games tournaments, all requiring travel and match time that generates no individual WTA ranking points. The tension between national team duty and individual career optimization represents a constant negotiation, particularly acute for players from smaller tennis nations whose federations have limited budgets and consequently expect maximum availability from their top players in exchange for financial support. Eala's estimated total annual income from all sources, sponsorships, federation support, and prize money reached approximately $180,000 to $210,000 in 2024 before taxes, agent commissions typically consuming 15 to 20%, and management fees. Against this gross income, her essential professional expenses totaled $150,000 to $175,000 annually, including full-time coaching at $60,000 to $75,000 per year, travel and accommodation for roughly 25 tournaments at $40,000 to $50,000, physical training and sports medicine at $25,000 to $30,000, equipment beyond sponsor provisions at $8,000 to $10,000, and miscellaneous costs for stringing, nutrition supplements, mental coaching, and tournament entry fees adding another $15,000 to $20,000. This financial structure leaves her with net annual earnings of approximately $30,000 to $60,000, modest compensation for an elite athlete carrying an entire nation's tennis expectations. Any extended injury absence that eliminates prize money while maintaining fixed coaching and training costs threatens to push her into negative cash flow, forcing difficult decisions about reducing support staff, skipping tournaments to save travel expenses, or seeking financial assistance from family or federation sources. Media coverage dynamics in the Philippines amplify both the opportunities and pressures surrounding Eala's career trajectory. Philippine television viewership for her matches averages between 900,000 and 1.5 million viewers, depending on tournament tier and her advancement through draws, representing exceptional performance in a sports media market typically dominated by basketball, boxing, and volleyball. Major Philippine networks, including ABS-CBN Sports and GMA Network, increased tennis broadcast hours by approximately 340% since 2022, specifically to capitalize on Eala-driven viewership, creating a media ecosystem where her success or failure directly impacts broadcaster programming decisions and advertising revenue. Tennis Channel Philippines, a cable sports network, reported that their viewership during Eala's matches exceeded their viewership for WTA 1000 finals, not involving Filipino players, by margins of 280% to 320%, demonstrating that national identification with a local star drives viewership more powerfully than even elite-level competition without regional representation. This concentrated media attention translates into nascent sponsorship interest from Philippine consumer brands seeking to associate with Eala's inspirational narrative and growing fame. Brands including Alaska Milk Corporation, Smart Communications Telecommunications, and Milo Nutritional Drinks expressed preliminary interest in endorsement partnerships during 2024, according to sports marketing executives. These companies typically offer Filipino athletes endorsement fees ranging from $30,000 to $150,000 annually, depending on the athlete's visibility, success level, and demographic appeal. However, these deals almost universally include performance clauses requiring minimum ranking thresholds, minimum tournament participation levels, or specific achievement milestones such as Grand Slam main draw appearances. An injury that drops Eala's ranking significantly or forces months of competition absence could render her ineligible for these contract provisions, causing potential deals to evaporate before they materialize into actual income. The ranking mathematics facing Eala in the aftermath of this hip flexor injury create a multi-layered defensive battle across overlapping timeframes, each with distinct implications for her 2025 season prospects and longer-term career trajectory. If the injury proves to be a standard Grade 2 hip flexor strain, requiring 4 to 6 weeks of complete rest from tennis activity, followed by 2 weeks of gradual return to full training intensity, she'll miss approximately 3 to 5 tournaments during the Asian fall season, where she had planned to compete. Each missed tournament represents immediate point losses from not competing, plus potential future losses when previous year's results from those events drop off her 52-week rolling ranking calculation. Conservative projections suggest she'll lose between 30 and 50 ranking points during the injury period, dropping her from approximately number 187 to somewhere between number 220 and number 245, depending on other players' results during her absence. This ranking deterioration creates cascading problems for tournament acceptance that extend beyond simple numerical position. Players ranked outside the top 200 face dramatically reduce direct acceptance rates into WTA 125 main draws, forcing them into qualifying rounds that require arriving at tournaments 2 to 3 days earlier, additional hotel nights and meal expenses, and winning 2 qualifying matches just to reach the main draw, where more substantial ranking points become available. Tournament directors typically reserve their limited wildcard entries for established names with proven fan appeal or local favorites who'll drive ticket sales, meaning Eala will have diminished access to the discretionary entries that might otherwise help her rebuild ranking momentum. She'll find herself competing in qualifying draws against other hungry players ranked between number 150 and number 250, all fighting for limited main draw spots in highly competitive early round matches, where a single subpar performance means earning only 1 or 2 qualifying points instead of the 18 to 80 points available from deep main draw runs. The recovery timeline scenarios present dramatically different implications depending on injury severity confirmed through MRI examination. Best case scenario involves a Grade 1 strain misdiagnosed initially as Grade 2, requiring only 2 to 3 weeks of rest followed by 1 week of gradual training progression before return to competition. This timeline would allow her to compete in late November 2024, creating opportunities to play 5 or 6 tournaments before the 2025 season begins in January. Strong results during this period, 2 semifinals or 1 title, could earn her 50 to 100 ranking points, keeping her within striking distance of the top 150 by Australian Open qualifying time in early January. Prize money losses would be limited to approximately $15,000 to $25,000 from missed tournaments, manageable without forcing significant changes to her professional support structure. Moderate scenario involves confirmed Grade 2 strain, requiring full 5 to 6 weeks without tennis activity, followed by 2 additional weeks of progressive return to match intensity, pushing her competition return into late December 2024 or early January 2025. This timing eliminates the entire Asian fall season from her schedule, approximately 6 to 8 missed tournaments representing potential prize money of $30,000 to $75,000 depending on hypothetical advancement depths, and ranking point opportunities of 50 to 150 points had she produced strong results. Her ranking would likely fall to number 235 to 255. Well outside direct acceptance into WTA main draws and barely qualifying for WTA 125 direct entries. She would miss direct acceptance into Australian Open qualifying, scheduled for early January, forcing a strategic choice between playing lower-tier ITF events in Australia, hoping to qualify through that pathway, or competing in WTA 125 events elsewhere to maximize ranking point accumulation for the remainder of the season. A painful either-or decision with no clearly optimal answer. Worst-case scenario, though hopefully unlikely based on initial medical evaluation, would involve discovering through MRI that the injury represents a grade 3 complete muscle tear or involves additional structural damage requiring surgical intervention. This would mandate 4 to 6 months of competition absence, potentially eliminating the entire first half of 2025, including all 4 Grand Slam tournaments from her schedule. Her ranking would plummet outside the top 400 as all accumulated points decayed off the 52-week rolling calculation. She would qualify for protected ranking status in this scenario, but as previously discussed, that protection offers minimal practical value for someone ranked number 187. She could use it for 8 main draw and 8 qualifying entries upon return, but those entries would largely be into events she wouldn't have accessed anyway at her ranking level. The psychological toll of 6-month absence combined with financial strain of maintaining professional staff while earning 0 prize money could prove genuinely career-threatening for a teenager without family wealth or guaranteed long-term sponsorship commitments. Grand Slam qualifying probabilities shift dramatically across these scenarios. Best-case timeline positions her to realistically target French Roland Garros, qualifying in late May 2025, allowing 6 months to rebuild her ranking from approximately number 200 to the number 145 cutoff range. This would require averaging semifinal performances at WTA 125 events or converting several WTA 250 qualifying runs into main draw opportunities where she could earn meaningful points. Historical analysis of players achieving similar ranking gains, 55 to 60 positions over 6 months, shows success rates of approximately 23%, typically requiring complete injury-free periods, favorable draw luck enabling multiple deep runs, and sustained confidence throughout the ranking climb process. It's possible, but far from guaranteed, and any additional minor injury during comeback dramatically reduces success probability. The dual narrative of Alex Eala's hip flexor injury against Viktorija Golubic exposes professional tennis's most uncomfortable truth. Championship mentality and fighting spirit cannot overcome physical breakdown, no matter how desperately a 19-year-old Grand Slam junior champion wants to will her body through pain. Statistical analysis of career earnings, differentials between injury-free and injury-prone players over 36-month development windows reveals that players who maintain health during ages 18 to 21 earn approximately $1.8 million more in cumulative prize money by age 24 compared to equally talented peers whose careers are interrupted by soft tissue injuries requiring extended recovery periods. This isn't merely about lost tournament prize checks, it represents the compounding advantage of consistent high-level competition that develops tactical sophistication, builds ranking momentum enabling entry into higher-tier events, and creates the match experience that separates top 50 regulars from perpetual qualifiers. What remains unknown carries as much weight as what the statistics reveal. MRI results will determine whether this represents a 2-week setback or a 2-month derailment. Medical consultations will decide between conservative rest protocols versus more aggressive intervention, and Eala's own body will ultimately dictate whether the hip flexor heals cleanly or develops into chronic weakness requiring ongoing management. The broader systemic question transcends her individual situation is the WTA's tournament structure, which incentivizes players outside the top 100 to compete nearly every week to accumulate ranking points, fundamentally incompatible with the physical development needs of 18 to 21-year-old athletes whose bodies haven't finished maturing. Other professional sports implement age-specific protections. Baseball limits young pitchers' innings. Basketball manages minutes for developing players, but tennis offers no such safeguards, leaving career decisions to teenagers and their support teams navigating impossible trade-offs between short-term ranking gains and long-term health sustainability. For the audience to consider, should the WTA mandate rest periods for players under 21, perhaps requiring 2-week breaks after every 3 consecutive tournament weeks, even if this slows ranking progression? Does Eala's US Open Junior Championship pedigree combined with her current injury pattern suggest higher or lower probability of reaching the top 50 compared to other recent junior Grand Slam champions who faced similar physical setbacks early in professional careers? And most fundamentally, is the issue individual scheduling choices made by players and coaches, or does the problem lie in tour structure that punishes players outside the top 150 for taking the rest their developing bodies desperately need?